What I found in the research was that 70% of patient harm events is due to communication breakdowns, and that came from the Joint Commission. So it's been in the literature also for quite a while. And you're right, the complexities of healthcare, the systems errors, when the Swiss cheese lines up, and that's when mistakes happen, we need to fix the processes that lead to that Swiss cheese holes lining up where errors occur. But without transparency and without conversations, I think that's been our biggest obstacle.
Welcome to the Super Clinic Project Podcast, where we take regular clinic owners and turn them into cash-based multimillionaire entrepreneurs. Warning, if you're a doctor who listens to this podcast regularly, you will make millions of dollars. Do not listen to this podcast unless you want to be a successful clinic owner who helps thousands of patients achieve their health goals and adds more money than you can imagine to your bank account. You've been warned.
Welcome to the Super Clinic Project Podcast, where we take regular clinic owners and we turn them into super clinic owners. Today, we're going to talk about patient safety. It's a rising concern, both if you're a patient and if you're a clinician. Today's guest is an expert on patient safety. She's a patient safety consultant, industry nurse leader. She has her doctorate in nursing. She's an educator, TEDx speaker, and she's also the founder of LifeBeat Solutions. So let us welcome the amazing Dr. Julie Siemers to the show today. Welcome, Julie.
Thank you. I appreciate being here.
Yeah, I'm very excited for you to be here. But I kind of think it's crazy. You wrote a best-selling book, and it was Surviving Your Hospital Stay, a nurse educator's guide to staying safe and living to tell about it. And I'm like, that is the craziest title in 2025. That should be something you would hear like turn of the century, that why haven't we figured this out yet? So I'm just going to put the floor over to you. Shouldn't we be past keeping our patients safe? Why is it still such an issue?
Well, that's an excellent question, and one I ask as well. I was a nurse already for 30 years at the bedside in the ER, trauma centers, 10 years on the helicopter. Before I started research on my master's degree and decided to do patient safety, and I was stunned at what I found. In fact, the first that I could find in American journals, medical journals, was back in 1955. And that was the JAMA, the Journal of American Medical Association, that said the most common thing that happens to the patients in the hospital is harm. And so for 70 years, we've known about this, but again, we don't talk about it. And I thought, nobody ever mentions this. It's like the best kept secret. I call it the Wizard of Oz curtain of healthcare.
I think it's coming to the forefront. Like if you are watching social media, now that we have so many people who go to social media to look at news, I mean, they want to see events as they're happening, what people are seeing, not necessarily the filter through different things. But there are a lot of patients speaking up about this, about medical negligence, about a lot of women are coming forward and talking about how their concerns, they were like, I was just told to lose some weight. Turns out I had stage 3 cancer, like stuff like that. And more to where it's just, this isn't a fluke. These aren't just, people doing this for likes. This is thousands upon thousands. And you had a really good quote, and it was that most harm isn't caused by bad people. It's caused by broken systems. But that doesn't mean that you're powerless. And I thought that was so, it's scary, right? That we have these systems that are broken, but yet whether you're a clinician or whether you're a patient, there is empowerment in that. We can fix a broken system. It's really hard to say, well, they're just bad people, right? That's terrifying. What are you going to do about that? There's nothing to do about that, right? But if there's systems, we can fix it. So what are some things, some ways that you have been working on that? Because I know that this is your life's your life's mission right now.
Yes. What I found in the research was that 70% of patient harm events is due to communication breakdowns, and that came from the Joint Commission. So it's been in the literature also for quite a while. And you're right, the complexities of healthcare, the systems errors, when the Swiss cheese lines up, And that's when mistakes happen. We need to fix the processes that lead to that Swiss cheese holes lining up where errors occur. But without transparency and without conversations, I think that's been our biggest obstacle. Because, for example, the Vanderbilt, a couple of years ago when the nurse gave the paralyzing agent instead of the anti-anxiety medication, and they tried to, keep it quiet like all hospitals do. It's just their nature in this litigious society that we live in. But they don't do the root cause analysis to get down to what contributed to that nurse, an individual being able to pull a paralytic out of automatic dispensing cabinet and do harm to a patient. What was the breakdowns? And so they did after the fact. But that's how we can learn. It's just like I always bring this up because it's such a good example. When Dennis Quaid has his premature twins, it was a long time ago, but still he had to go before the courts and make it mandatory that the pharmaceutical company change the labels on the heparin, which is a blood thinner, because that's how his twins were overdosed. The vials of heparin looked exactly the same. 1 in 1,000 looked the same as 1 in 10,000. And so in our hurry, that's where mistakes happen. But again, if we do the root cause analysis and say, we can fix this, then that's what we need to be all committed to doing.
And so how are you getting that commitment there on the ground? Because you're working at this all the time.
Well, there's two components in the patient safety quadrant. The patient is in the middle, and then we've got the whole healthcare team around them, but we've also got the patient who needs to direct us on what kind of care they want or whatever, but their families too that are there to advocate for them and to be a part of the system, not a bystander that sits in the corner in the chair in the hospital room. And so I think that's our biggest opportunity, is learning how to bridge the communication. And that's what my TEDx topic was about, is how healthcare professionals need to listen to patients and their families, and patients and their families need to learn to speak up and not be a passive participant, but an active participant in their healthcare journey.
Yeah, I see the issues on so many sides of this. It is difficult when it's difficult when you're the family member, and I'm thinking of my mother. Thankfully she's good right now, but there was a point where she probably would have passed away had there not been this intense amount of communication. She was losing blood. They kept on giving her, transfusions. She was older. They couldn't figure out what was happening. And in that process with the medications and everything else, she stayed in the hospital for almost, 2.5 months. And she is the strongest person I've ever met. Brilliant, brilliant woman. But there was a point where she was like, I just don't want to go forward anymore. And they're pushing me to do this. I don't want to do this. And then they bring in a counselor when nobody was there. And the counselor was like, well, we just can stop all care. Had that happened, she would have died. And that wasn't her. That was her not having enough blood and everything else that was going on there, and just being tired and overly medicated. And I have a very large family. And then, so now she's fine. That was like almost 3 years ago, with 3 more years with her doing stuff and going places. It can be a big deal. But how do you, for people that get, how many people, they take their blood pressure before they go to the doctor and it's sky high because they're just so nervous. And now you have those same sort of people. They don't want to speak up. They don't want to get in trouble. There's a feeling like, what if they arrest me? There's all these fears. And then you have actual cases where things have went sideways for well-meaning families. So how do we combat all of that to get people to actually speak up?
I think if we understand the consequences or potential consequences if we don't speak up, that is where I think the courage, that mindset shift and that courage needs to come in. And on my TEDx talk, I give 3 different stories about patients that were harmed in the medical system, the healthcare system, and it ended up dying. And their families did try to speak up, but they still weren't heard. And so I think that patients and families need the tools to empower themselves by being educated and informed. And I think that's a shift that we have to do. And that's kind of my mission too, is to bring that awareness and informing and educating, so that they can say, hey, my mom, even though she's 75, is never confused. Something is wrong. Somebody needs to reassess her, or whatever the case may be. My husband's complaining of pain that's, very unusual for him. He's not like this. So, and that's where the healthcare team listening comes in. But again, it's a two-way street.
Right. And for healthcare professionals, we have a lot of clinics here that listen to us, and clinic owners. For those that are there, you've got, I need to see this many patients, and then they will have their own horror stories of, well, I did listen this one time, and it turns out they were just a malignant sort of personality type, and this and this and this, and I hindered their care. How do we combat that? What can we do on the education side for healthcare professionals and clinicians?
I think that's really important, and we've got to really open our hearts and open our ears to listening. I think, that kind of patient, yes, we all fear that kind of patient because they take so much time, and,
Yes.
it ends up to be, kind of a waste of time. But I think if we shift to that compassion of, I really want to hear what's going on. So we do need to train the patient side of it too, to be succinct and to keep a journal and to write things down. And then when they come in, it's not, a 30-minute process of trying to figure out what's going on. So I think it takes both sides to come in the middle.
Yeah, I see technology, especially AI, is really helping in this. I mean, you can have automated journals that they can put it in, and then the AI can look over symptoms. If they see massive red flags, just silently in the background, tag the doctor and say, hey, these are, these 5 keywords or things are coming through, maybe look in on them, and different things like that. Have you worked with any groups like that are trying to develop ways, to where it can be more transparent and where communication needs to happen, but at the same time, there is a time limit on things. We got so many people that we've got to see, and you can't just sit for 3 or 4 hours listening to, what's been happening these last couple of months. You have to kind of get that data quickly.
Yeah. I think the education, both for the healthcare workers, whether it's the LPNs, RNs, or whatever that are, doing the triage for patients, is listening and finding those key. If we use our clinical judgment and critical thinking, and we hear, like you said, those key words, and yes, AI is great at compiling like early warning scores, right? And having the patients understand, it is important that you've been short of breath. It is important that you report you're holding water in your feet and you can't get your rings off, or whatever. Those kinds of what is important and what are the things that signal to the healthcare team that we need a heads up, or, okay, that's a concern, we need to dig a little bit further.
And I worked with, I've done physician turnarounds for a long time. I just have over 20 some odd years working in clinics and things like that on the business side of things. But I saw that a lot, especially when I started working with an anesthesiologist once, where people would not disclose just over the counter supplements or vitamins that they were taking. You'd be amazed how many of this ashwagandha or different things like that actually do, if you're taking other sorts of meds, there are contraindications that your doctor really does need to know about. Like, if anyone's listening who's on the patient side, don't roll your eyes when they ask you to bring in medications or things. Think about, hey, did my friend show me this TikTok for losing weight, or maybe to lower my cortisol? I mean, that's like big. Like right now, there's the Goalie ones that give you the things. I'm just thinking of this, but there's probably things that you cannot take that with, right? Is it natural and fine on its own? Has it been cleared by the FDA? Yes, but at the same time, it isn't great for everybody. Not everything is great for everybody.
Yeah, like fish oil, right? I mean, you've got to stop that a week before surgery.
See, even I didn't know that. Really? You have to take that? Oh, wow. Okay.
It can contribute to bleeding after surgery.
Oh, wow.
It works as a mini or a little bit of a blood thinner. Yeah.
Yeah, because you worked in trauma. You were like, didn't you do like LifeFlight or something like
I
that
did.
for like a decade?
Yeah, I did. It was, I loved it because it was so challenging and every day was different.
And you saw everything. I mean, you see
Yeah.
everything, major traumas.
Yeah.
And so what was the thing that finally pushed you into this to actually go from being with the patients and patient care to really moving out in this whole kind of, new thing that you're developing?
Yeah, well, I transitioned off the helicopter in 2009 into nursing education. And that's when I started my master's and then my doctoral degree. And it was all on research on patient safety. The more I discovered, the more surprised and even shocked that I was. Like, I had no idea medical mistakes were the third leading cause of death. And I was in the healthcare system. And I was like, yeah, how can that be?
How can that be in 2025? How can that be?
Yeah.
I know that it's well, anyway, I could go on and on and on. We get a lot of different things that, I have doctors in my family. My niece is in medical school right now. She did her white coat like end of last year, her, the ceremony, but she's still in school. And I just listened to her and how challenging like all of that is. Like, how do you fit it all in? And people's lives are on the line the whole time. It's just a lot to expect of humans in some ways. I think we're going to have to rely more and more on technology, but then there's this thing against technology.
Yeah.
But I think communication is really important. I live in Texas and I'm here in Galveston, and we have one of the largest teaching hospitals, University of Texas Medical Branch, that's here. I'm not very, within an hour and a half from the Texas Medical Center. And I have, I was a pharmaceutical rep back in the day, a long time ago. And I'm going to say that some of the biggest communication things is just from my area and even Oklahoma is language. Language can be the biggest thing. There's so many healthcare providers that English is not their native language. And so just if we could improve that alone to where the communication can get up, because I've had it happen with me and I've thought, I don't think they understood anything that I'd really just tried to tell them on this. But it's so important to me, and you don't want to be rude. You don't want anyone to think that you're being mean or bigoted or something, right? But you do want to be heard because this is about your health. And I'm really hoping that I use AI in everything I do. And I can tell you just in the last 6 months, just the improvements on the basic things I'm using it for to coach people, it has improved. It's insanely improved. So I don't think it's going to take over human jobs as much as some people think it'll take over human jobs, but I do think it will force people to be more of experts of what they do, because if you don't know what you're doing to begin with, then you won't know the right questions to ask. And you can never move the AI to help you in the way that it needs to, because it's not a thinking, breathing thing, Right. But how are you using AI at all in what you're doing, and has it changed what you're doing?
I do. I obviously read through. If I'm trying to articulate, like when I was in school, it took me hours and hours to write papers because I couldn't articulate how I wanted to say things. And I have AI help with that. And then it's like, oh yeah, that is better. And then I tweak it, so that it sounds more professional. But some things are a little bit off, and that's okay. That's where you go in and, correct or update or, say, well, I was thinking more blood transfusion safety should include these principles, based on my experience. But I find it very helpful, and I recommend it to patients too. For example, when you're getting discharge instructions, you can't remember everything that was said, and you can't remember what they said about this medication. And so I find that when patients put in, hey, I'm on this new medication, what should I watch for? What are the cautions? That it really is helpful for them because they can do it when they're ready to hear it, right? And then they've got it in black and white.
I wish I could do it. I was thinking of well, my mom's not going to listen to this, but I was thinking about, there's this little, it looks like a credit card, but it actually can record any conversation and then it'll put it into a written thing. And I was like, man, she could just take this with it to the doctor's appointments. And then you can take it, I'd have to show her how to do that, but she's very tech savvy. I mean, she's got a computer, she's got a smartphone, she's tech savvy. To do that, then she might be able to figure out how to do it, and then she'd have it. Because even in conversations like this, I will go back and look at the transcript, because what we're recording right now, I'm automatically recording our transcript, and I'll go, oh, I forgot she said that. Because I get into the thing, or my mind is thinking, well, it's going to my thoughts are going to something. And I think that could be very helpful for patients too. But if the doctor's office had something like that, when they're speaking or in the hospital, to where it could record it and then print it, and then here it is, everything we just talked about, so you can read over that, or you can have your family read over that. That could be a lot more instantaneous than I think people would think, and not so expensive.
Yeah. I've actually, I'm building an app for patients and their families right now. And it will have a bunch of guides in there, scripts on what to say when you're going in just to talk to the doctor. If you're concerned about something and you're in the hospital, it's basically taking the 19 chapters in my book and putting it into 6 modules. And they can flip to, okay, we're going to surgery. What do we need to know? Okay, we're going to talk about informed consent. We're going to talk about marking the site. All those kinds of things, so that they can feel more prepared and not like a passive recipient, that they can then come in with questions and ask the team. Even the simple things like, sir, you didn't wash your hands. I would prefer that you do that before you touch my mother. Knowing that healthcare acquired infections are impacting 1 in every 31 patients in the hospital. Yeah.
Gosh, I didn't know it was that big.
Yeah.
Yeah. And so some people just don't want to be rude, but it isn't rude to remind someone, because they just probably forgot. Right. And you just need to remind them. I mean, yeah, no, that's important. That's really important. And so now let me look back. It's LifeBeat Solutions. That's your company now. And so what are the biggest thing that your company now is focused on?
So LifeBeat Solutions, I created courses for nurses, because even when they graduate and get their nursing license, there's still a really pretty big gap in their knowledge to keep patients safe. And so it's a reminder of the concepts that they either forgot or didn't learn well. Each course, I have 35 of them, are about an hour, and one of them is on vital signs. And that sounds really basic, but if we go back to the pathophysiology of what does an elevated heart rate really mean? What happens when the heart rate drops? And then they can take that knowledge and apply it to the patient situation. So got that for the nurses, and now developing, taking the book idea or the book knowledge and putting it into this app. And I'm just really trying to help both ends of the healthcare spectrum, the patients and families and the healthcare providers. And there's no shame in forgetting things, because you're never going to remember it all. You're never going to learn it all. And how can we augment our own abilities to better care for patients is kind of what I'm looking at.
No, that's this is absolutely needed. It's a very big, daunting task. So, and now I'm going to have you put on your CEO cap. So, and because of course we're all clinic owners, so I'm interested in the entrepreneurial part of it too. So you're developing this app, and now you've got the courses, but the whole world is open for you to be able to develop this on many different areas. Have you thought about where you want to be in, let's say, 5 years?
Yeah, it's interesting. The CMS has a grant for rural healthcare providers, EMS as well as, it was just conversation happened yesterday. They need some failure to rescue training for EMS providers as well as the rural hospitals. So I'm working on a program for that, which essentially they still have a lot of failure to rescue in the EMS system, because for example, if the ambulance and the paramedic bring in a patient that seems stable, but just had a car, accident, and they've got some injuries, but they seem stable, a lot of times that's where the thinking stops versus, oh, what could be going on? And so I call that the surveillance and the vigilance of watching for something that could happen and go wrong. Because a lot of times they'll bring them into the ER and the ER staff will get report, and somewhere in the process, something goes wrong and we lose that patient. I
That
did
happened
a social,
tragically here. We
yeah,
had, I live on a beach town, and there was a group of kids, and we have beaches you can drive on. And of course, they get in the back of the truck, and they were being dumb, and the truck went out, girl fell out of the truck. And so she seemed fine. She was talking. They took her to UTMB. Her parents came to see her, and they said, "We think she's fine. We haven't really seen anything. Y'all can go home." And like 4 hours later, she passed. And
wow.
it was just.
Did she have an epidural bleed?
Yeah, yeah. It was just, and they didn't. The parents were like, "Why weren't we? We could have stayed there. Anyway, it was tragic. Yeah, but I know someone that happened to, and it was absolutely shocking. Because when they're 16 years old, you're supposed to, that's just the beginning. It's not even the beginning. It's you're still about to have the beginning of everything still.
Yeah.
So
yeah, I think that continual observation and anticipating what could be. We are taught, if a patient comes in with chest pain, we have to immediately rule out an acute MI. I did a post last week on a 42-year-old woman that came in, and she didn't have the classic symptoms that males typically have. And that's true with women in heart disease. They don't present the same. And she did have ST changes or, ischemic changes on her EKG, but it was kind of minimized because she was young. And nobody did a troponin, which just blew me away. And sent her home, and 4 hours later, she's dead too. So we have to anticipate and not over-diagnose and over-order diagnostics and all that kind of thing. But it's, again, that critical thinking and clinical judgment.
Yeah, there's a lot of work that still needs to be done. I'm glad that you're there in the trenches asking these questions and seeing how to, develop the systems for it. Because as you know, as a business owner, you have your own systems just to run your business, right? Yeah. What numbers are you looking what's going to happen? And you have to constantly work on that. And systems that may have worked. I'm going to tell you, almost all of our clients, they had systems that were working just fine pre-COVID. And then those systems, which of course were tracked to, let's say, Facebook or their marketing and how they get patients, that doesn't work anymore. It's a totally different world. And they're like, but that used to work just fine. We were supposed to open up. It was supposed to go back to normal, but there was some big shifts that happened. And now we're all still trying to figure that out. Right. But and I'm sure it's the same, we had systems, they were working and now they're not. I didn't realize it was so big. It was number 3 though.
And I honestly think, in my opinion, it's underreported because we have sentinel events and never events, and it's not mandatory reporting. Yeah, so, I just read some statistics the other day about sentinel events, and there was only like 1,500, which is severely underreported in my estimation. Yeah. But I think, again, we have to take that psychological safety and really apply it to anywhere we work to create this just culture, and not just say it in name, but really we have to adopt that as, if someone speaks up during surgery and says, "Sir, I think you broke sterile field," that they have the courage to do that, and they don't, and they wouldn't expect the physician to bite their head off. They'd say, "Oh, okay, well, thanks for telling me. Let me change my gloves," versus risking the patient getting an infection. So I think we have a ways to go, but I think the more awareness we can create about, it's a beast. But I think the more that we can work together and get the message out there, and that we want to make change and involve the patients and families in It's not
See,
about,
I think that's smart to do it both ways. If you
yeah,
have the patients that are becoming more educated, it's going to, because this is a service, a provider, we're in a service-based business. And so if the customer is becoming more educated on what they want and what they're looking forward to, and they're doing it in a professional way, then the consequence of it, if you do not lift up your things, the patients will find other ways, and it won't include you. So it's got to be this two-pronged approach to where everybody's looking at it. I think that's actually very smart.
Yeah, I think for the healthcare providers, yes, have we had school 4 years, 12 years, somewhere in between, and that we have the medical knowledge, but that family member also has that nuanced, they can recognize those subtle changes that may happen. And so again, it's not about criticizing the healthcare provider. This isn't like my mom. Can you please reassess her? That should be, to us, the wake-up call to say, oh, I didn't realize, that's not your mom's baseline behavior. And so, yeah, let's figure it out. Is it her glucose levels? Is it her oxygen levels? Her electrolytes are off, like your mom, right?
Yeah. And I mean, there was a bunch of us going, no, that's not her. She's hardy. She's going to want to live forever. This is like, that's not, and certainly it wasn't. She was like, I said that. I don't even remember. I would never have said that. Right. And like when she got normal again, and, but it was scary, because things could have been put in place if there weren't a lot of people there. And that would have been the end of her life. Right. And was it necessarily their fault? No, they were just responding to what was happening at the time. Right. But it is definitely needed. Guys, I could talk to you for a while on this, because it's so important, right? You're trying to fix one of the biggest causes of death, right, in the US. So we are talking to Dr. Julie Siemers. Julie, can you please let everyone know how they can find you, how they can learn more? Because even if this starts, even with our just clinic owners, we're not even in hospitals, but if more and more clinic owners said, hey, I've just read this book, help me help you. You are empowered to ask me questions and to do this, but there's a correct way to do it. And this is how we can communicate better. Then that's going to change things, right? So how do they find you?
So my website is drjuliesiemers.com. That's my social media with Instagram and TikTok and Facebook too. And my book's listed on Amazon. I will post the app when it's ready on my website as well. My TEDx talk you can find if you just look how not to die in the hospital. But yeah, I'm happy to help in any way that I can with education and empowerment and connection. And one thing that I tell patients and their families to do when they're ready to go to the hospital, or even before, they don't even have anything planned, is to go on hospitalsafetygrade.org, look up their hospital and see if it's an A rated or B, C, D, or F for safety. Safety and quality. There's 32 metrics that you can look up and say, oh my God. In fact, I told it to this pregnant woman the other day. She looked up her hospital she was planning to deliver. It was a C-rated hospital, but she found an A-rated hospital only 30 minutes away.
Really? What a big difference that is.
Yes. And the research tells us that if we go to a D or F-rated hospital, our chances of bad outcomes are 91% higher. Isn't that crazy?
That is crazy. Well, thank you so much for being here today. And thank everybody who's listening. Be sure to like, follow, and share, and give us a 5-star review. That's how we get world-class people like Dr. Siemers here on the show. And guys, y'all have a wonderful Super Clinic week. And again, if you want any of this information, or you forget, or I don't know, just go to superclinic.com and you can click on our free school, and we'll have this episode here. We're also going to be creating a worksheet and things that go with this episode, like we do with everything. So we'll have all the links for you, but you can get even more from this as well. Everybody have a great week. And thank you again, Julie, for being here.
Thank you.
You've been listening to the Super Clinic Project podcast. If you like what you hear, subscribe and stay tuned for further episodes of the Super Clinic Project podcast.